Hey there, and welcome back to Cinema Recap. Today we're going to be looking at the 2017 adventure biographical film Papillon, based on a true story starring Charlie Hunnam and Rami Malek. Spoilers ahead.
I can't believe they gave you a life sentence.
In the time that follows, his trial comes and goes. A witness testifies against him. He's sentenced to a life in prison and disowned by France. Well, he breaks it off with Nanette for her own good and vows to break out of prison one day and kill those who accused him. Now, during his processing, he meets a fellow thief named Julot, and a famous millionaire known for counterfeit bills named Louis Degas. Three of them are processed, disowned by France, and sent on a ship for South America to live out the rest of their lives. Well, the idea is that prisoners will live out their sentence and then become colonists of French Guiana. Now, on the ship, Papillon offers to befriend Degas in exchange for enough money for an escape.
Said the scorpion to the frog.
Thinking he knows better, Degas turns him down and chooses to sleep near the guards instead. Well, the first night would go as you would expect, and Degas is quickly proven wrong when the man next to him is gutted and killed in plain sight of a guard. The killer takes the money that was in the man's bowels and bribes the guard to keep quiet. Now, the next morning, Degas tells him that he'll reconsider his offer. If Papillon keeps him safe, he'll underwrite any escape attempt for him. Now, the two are confident that they'll be free from prison, but in different ways. Papillon's confident that he can make an escape, and Degas has all the confidence in the world that his wife and lawyer will file for an appeal for his freedom. As long as Papillon can keep Degas alive, both can get what they want. Now, that night, the same man who killed Degas' friend returns for him. This time, however, he's under the protection of Papillon, and so he quickly dives into action and tackles the man to the floor, and the two begin to struggle. Papillon's got the upper hand and beats that man mercilessly with his bare hands. The knife the man intended to use for killing falls to the floor, and Degas grabs it for himself. The commotion gets the attention of the guards, and the fight's broken up. Now, during the commotion, Julot takes the knife from Degas and hides it under his foot. The guards catch Papillon literally, red-handed, and he earns himself a spot in first class while Degas is saved, for now. So when they finally arrive at their destination, Julot fakes his own injury by cutting his leg with the knife and jumping ship in order to get sent to the hospital. He later attempts an escape off-screen that gets the attention of everyone at the prison and gives Papillon hope. Now all the prisoners are lined up.
Thinking about escape, feel free to try.
Warned against escape and murder. The guards will shoot you on the spot, and if you're caught, you'll be put in solitary confinement for 2 years. If you try a second time and fail, you get 5 years in solitary confinement and a life sentence on Devil's Island. Murder earns you a trip to the guillotine. More so, the prison is surrounded by thick jungle and a vast ocean. Escape doesn't mean you'll survive. In the jungle, you can starve, and in the ocean, those sharks will come. So the two establish themselves in prison and bribe their way into work at the hospital with the money that Degas had smuggled out his butt. However, their plan fails when Deputy Warden recognizes Degas as the man who got his brother-in-law sent to jail with counterfeits. So, instead, the two are sent to hard labor, where Degas is much too weak to help out. Now, at one point, they almost lose the money because of some diarrhea, and Papillon's forced to smuggle the money in his own butt. The two make a quiet ruckus and get the attention of some other men that despise Degas' personality. However, it's not all hard work and butt stuff. Papillon befriends a former Navy man named Selye, who says he can get a boat for him if given money, and at one point the prison guards pick up a pimp and his girls.
How much to take me up the coast?
This gets Papillon close enough to try and bribe the man for a ride on his boat in order to escape. Now later at the showers, Papillon and Degas are ambushed by the men they angered earlier, and Papillon's forced to fight him off, breaking a rib in the process. The ambush scares Degas and he's convinced that he'll die before his appeal. So in an attempt to preserve his own life, he asks Papillon to take him with during the escape. And while Papillon's done his time in the Navy, Degas is inexperienced in every physical activity. So Papillon refuses and drops the conversation. Now the next day, the prisoners are rounded in the courtyard. It appears that a guard has died in a failed escape attempt, and his killer must be punished. It was Julot, and as it turns out, he was caught after all. Papillon and Degas watch helplessly as their friend gets decapitated right in front of them. To add insult to injury, the two are then asked to get rid of that body. Now while they're carrying his corpse through the jungle, Degas has a panic attack. The guard warns him to get up and continue, but Dega is much too frail to do so. So in response, the guard begins to whip him violently, making him lose his glasses and bleed from the lashes. Papillon watches helplessly as his friend's being beaten. When Dega cries out for him, he storms over and takes the opportunity to strike the guard in the back of the head with a rock. Well, it knocked him out unconscious, and Papillon makes a break for it without Dega. So ensues a chase through the jungle, and Papillon escapes into the river. It looks like he succeeded, but when he gets to the boat, he tells the pimp that he doesn't have the money.
I'll give you everything I got.
And that man's loyal to the warden, so any money that he offers, the warden would double. This guy's brought back to prison the next day, and lucky for him, the guard he attacked survived, meaning instead of execution, he's sentenced to 2 years in solitary confinement. In hindsight, the guillotine would have been more merciful. So, his time in solitary is lived out in silence, and he begins to go crazy. He barely reacts when the guard he attacked comes back for vengeance, and he gets severely wounded. He is starved, with minimum food and left to rot. But luckily for him, Dega bribes another inmate to smuggle Papillon a coconut in with his water. And this small ounce of kindness is enough to motivate him to stay in shape and not break. And this goes on for a while before that inmate is eventually caught and killed by one of the guards.
Hold on.
Now when Papillon's approached about the situation, he refuses to rat out Dega and accepts half rations as a form of punishment. Now time continues to move on slowly, and his body begins to deteriorate. As more time passes, Papillon begins to go insane. When he's bribed with food, he continues to refuse to rat out Dega and is sent to live out a remainder of his sentence in darkness. Now in this darkness, he tries to kill himself to no avail. Instead, he severely hallucinates about the time in France. And while his body is looking no more, it's becoming more apparent that his mind has gone as well. He envisions a safe and Dega as a mime, and it seems like, symbolically, he's been broken. He tries to crack imaginary safes and dreams about Nanette and the life they once had. So now 2 years pass by and he's free from solitary. Now in the time that's passed, Dega has worked his way up the prison ranks and now works closely with the warden doing his books. As Papillon predicted, Dega's appeal has run into its fair share of problems. And on top of that, his wife has recently been remarried to his lawyer. It seems that both of them are in this for the long haul now. When Dega works up the courage to visit him in the hospital, it's revealed that Papillon has not gone insane.
I'm gonna live a different kind of life.
Instead, he's still very much aware, but is trying to convince everybody that he isn't. He vows to Dega that if he escapes, he'll live a different kind of life. Now fortunately, after 2 years, Papillon's friend Cellier is still around. The last time they spoke, Cellier said he could get him a boat, and Papillon wants to get him involved in the plan even though Dega doesn't trust him. In addition, the warden's hosting a movie night for some local politicians. The guards will be spread thin. So with Dega agreeing to speak to Cellier, the duo begin to hatch a plan of escape.
Get out! He's out of his mind!
Now, in order to preserve his cover, Papillon creates a scene and sends Dega away. The doctors seem to believe his insanity and attempt to comfort him with some pills. Dega plays along and the two go their separate ways. Now that night, Papillon approaches a fellow inmate named Maturette. And he's being harassed for sexual favors by the turnkey. Now Papillon offers him an opportunity to escape with him, but he needs him to distract his abuser in order to make the escape. After some pushback, this man agrees and joins their crew. So the next day, the four of them meet up to confirm each other's roles. Dega is given a handful of sedatives that Papillon's been saving, and he proves himself to have grown into a capable fighter himself. Now that night, as the movie's playing, their plan begins to unfold. Sedatives are strong and kick in fast. One of the guards falls asleep standing up, and they're able to take out the rest of the guards fairly easy. The plan does run into a bit of a hiccup when it begins to storm, and Dega is held back to speak to the warden. And when the power goes out, the guards scramble. They almost leave Dega behind, but he meets up with them just in time. Now the group improvises and uses the keys that Dega stole to take the walkway up the guard tower. With the power out, they can use the cover of the darkness to hop on the wall. Dega breaks his leg during the fall, but still manages to move along, and the four of them make their way into the jungle, where they meet up with Cellier's contact. Dega uses the last of his money to pay him, and miraculously, they get the boat that they're promised.
Fuck! What kind of shit boat did you get us?
However, the boat's very poorly built and is practically half sunk. And when they get out to sea, Cellier wants to kill Dega, believing that he's dead weight. Papillon holds him back as long as he can, but things boil over when a storm approaches from a distance. Cellier brings out a knife, and the three have no choice but to attack him. Dega does that killing blow and stabs him to death. His body is then lost to sea. They don't really have a lot of time to think about what just happened, as that storm's coming in, and their boat is nearly sunk. Somehow later on they wash up on the shores of Colombia, where a nun and a group of indigenous people take them in. This nun knows where they came from and insists that they repent for their sins. Papillon insists on leaving, but Machuret and Dega want to stay. This is where the trio decides to part ways. Papillon makes his way out of the village and is free, but decides to turn around when he spots a vehicle of guards heading towards the village for his friend. He tries to warn his friends in time, but Machuret's shot while Papillon and Dega are caught and brought back to the prison. After 5 years in solitary, Papillon's brought to Devil's Island to live the remainder of his life. And there he meets up with Dega once again, now old and crippled. Dega's been living the last 5 years on Devil's Island. He's drawn on the walls and made it his home. He invites Papillon to stay with him, and after some time he begins to open back up. The island is quiet and secluded. The cliffs are high and there is no hope of escape. Even so, Papillon continues to ponder a route for escape. And after some time, he comes up with a scheme to build a raft of coconuts, and when the tides are low, they can safely jump off the cliff and ride the current to the mainland. Dega agrees to help, but when the day comes, he decides to stay, as he's found peace on that island, while Papillon leaves, and the two say their last goodbyes and go their separate ways. Like a madman, Papillon jumps off that cliff, and by some act of God, he survives that jump and rides the current to freedom. Time passes, and suddenly it's 1969. Papillon's made it. He's a free man. Now all old and having lived a full life, he's made a home for himself in Venezuela with a wife. He risks being arrested, travels to France to publish his memoir.
It's the story of a lot of men.
And his final act was in honor of all the men that were sent to prison with him. Over 80,000 prisoners were condemned to the penal colony in French Guiana. Most of them never returned to France. Henri Charrière Papillon became the #1 bestseller for 21 weeks in France. To date, it has sold over 13 million copies in 30 languages. In 1970, the French Minister of Justice signed a decree allowing him to return to France, and for the remainder of his life, he lived as a free man. That penal colony in French Guiana did not survive him, a total of 7 years in solitary, and he still had the willpower to escape. Wow, I don't know, what do you think? Would you have abandoned your friends for freedom? Could you have survived 7 years in solitary? Let us know in that comment section below with the hashtag #CinemaRecap.